Hello, my name's Frank Golding and I'm sitting next to Leonie Sheedy, who's the CEO of CLAN, Care Leavers Australasia Network, which is the group responsible for the Australian Orphanage Museum where we are today. I wonder if we could talk generally about why a museum like this is necessary, Leonie.
Well, to make our childhoods visible to the Australian society, because it's a very hidden history. Children were told that they should be ashamed, that nobody valued them, nobody wanted them, and children who have grown up to be adult Australians have not disclosed what happened to them in an orphanage.
I think many children also didn't understand why they were in an orphanage. They were simply taken away from their families and kept there living with strangers.
No museum in Australia pays acknowledgement to the children who ended up in Australia's orphanages, and there were 900 orphanages, children's homes, missions.
Just give us a sense of the scale of this. You've said how many orphanages and homes there were, but how many children?
Well, it was a guesstimate because nobody really knows. The Senate inquiry said there were 500,000 Australians were put into Australia's orphanages and other homes, but nobody truly knows. They don't know the figure because nobody ever bothered to collate this information or care about those children.
And what was it like? I mean, the museum itself will tell us something of that, but just give us a general idea of what it was like for a child to grow up without their parents.
Well, to be a parentless child is you are completely different to the rest of your fellow Australians, and to grow up in a place that had 300 children or 100 children, all dealing with their own trauma. It was a lonely childhood. People often tell us that they were always hungry. Sometimes they didn't even have food. They were cold, they had no love, and they were treated with such cruelty.
Who are the sorts of people who would come to the Orphanage Museum? Are they former care leavers totally, or their families?
Many care leavers come, their descendants of care leavers come, and the general public come.
Well, we hope this video will show some aspects of the exhibits that are really important to see and to hear about.
This is the art room. This painting is called The Raft of the Clan. It's based on the Raft of Medusa. And around the edges are politicians, the 6 royal commissioners and care leavers all around. And it's symbolic that children in orphanages were left to float, just like the French citizens that this painting is based on.
Leonie, this catches the eye as you walk in this room. What's this painting?
This painting is called The Black Crows. And these 3 women are my heroes. They never went to high school. They were busy working in an orphanage, and they couldn't read and write when they left the orphanage. Their brother Johnny died in an accident, but he really died of neglect.
This is the room that people would perhaps come into first. It gives them a bit of an overview. It shows that there are developments right from day one virtually of white settlement in Australia, that there was need for orphanages or children's institutions, missions run by churches and charities as well as by state government. And then we have these pictures so that people can see various homes that we've got photographs of.
People often remark on how majestic those buildings were.
Oh yes.
But also at the same time recognising that great trauma and suffering was inflicted on children in those big orphanages. To get the Prime Minister of Australia, the highest legal officer in this nation, in Australia, to issue an apology, we had to work very hard for it, and we eventually got it in 2009. They apologised for the humiliation, the stigma, the neglect. We were made to feel worthless, and just the cruelty. There are countless ways to harm a child, and all of them leave a mark. We apologise that instead of reading, writing and arithmetic, many instead learnt floggings, beatings and brutality.
You know, Leonie, I think this room is the heart of this place because it represents the children's voices, the children who were not heard, who couldn't have a voice and have a say in how they were brought up. And look at these objects, you know, the cot and the signs. Babies in arms will not be admitted to the wards.
Yes.
Visitors are requested not to touch the babies. I mean, how heartless is that, that you wouldn't touch a baby?
Care leavers have donated all these things, and some of these school reports have the names of perpetrators who sexually used them and abused them, and they can't bear to hold that paperwork in their homes, so they've donated it to us. But just imagine every time he looks at his school report cards, you know, the name of the abuser, the pedophile, is there.
You wouldn't find anything like this in an ordinary museum. This is a really good collection of placards, posters, pictures, memorabilia from the long struggle that you and other care leavers have conducted for 25 more years. Just so many protests, public displays of demonstrations of the need to give care leavers support, to recognise their history. The struggle that this room represents is so important, because without that struggle, without care leavers leading the way, we would never have got the Senate inquiry, the Royal Commission, the apologies that we mentioned before, the services, the redress scheme. There are huge achievements for care leavers speaking up and speaking out and telling the truth of what happened in Australia's history.
So the coffin represents people who have died in orphanages, and we carried it from the Department of Human Services to the steps of Parliament House. And Frank, you're at that protest in 2011.
Yes, and one of the things that I note here, these are the cases that were publicised and known about. There were scores of children, perhaps hundreds of children who died and were never acknowledged publicly. Well, we have various levels of sponsorship. What's significant to us is that many of these are care leavers themselves, leaving really significant sums of money in their will or making a donation while they're alive. Some of them have got their redress and they've donated a proportion of that. We've only just touched the surface, haven't we? We've shown a little bit of a sample of what the Orphanage Museum contains. It's growing all the time and changing. There's things I haven't seen before, I've seen today. So if you want to see the full range, you've got to come and spend some time here to just savour everything that we have to offer. One of the other notable things about this museum is that there are so many donors of items, people who have said this is the safe place for my treasured possessions that I've kept since childhood. And I'd also like to mention the fact that the museum requires volunteers to help it. I mean, there's lots and lots of things that volunteers can do, and we appreciate their assistance very much. Well, Leonie, you've shown us a sample of what the museum has to offer. Please come and visit Geelong at the Australian Orphanage Museum. We will ensure that you have a spectacularly interesting time here.
Come on down to Geelong, Victoria, and see this amazing social justice museum.